Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Josh Makower. I'm the director of Stanford Biodesign and serial entrepreneur in the medtech space. Pleasure to be here. Thanks, LSI, for inviting us. And we have a fantastic panel here, and we're going to, touch on their businesses and backgrounds and really talk about how they're disrupting clinical workflows really in an effort to improve patient care. So why don't I start right off with Colby? You want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your company?
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
And thanks, everyone, for coming and welcoming us. I'm Colby Holtshouse. I'm the CEO of May Health. May Health is working on a technology for women with polycystic ovary syndrome. PCOS prevents women from ovulating, and our device is intended to allow ovulation in order to both conceive at home and continue your fertility journey, as well as looking at the broader symptoms of PCOS that we can tackle. We're a clinical stage company working on our US IDE study right now, which is a randomized controlled trial ongoing in the US, looking at US commercialization after that. We're also on the verge of getting our CE mark, looking at a pilot EU commercialization in the nearer term.
Fantastic. Thanks. So we have Sanjay. You want to introduce yourself? And
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Sanjay Kakkar. I'm the CEO of Tensive. I'm a physician by training, but I've been a serial biotech entrepreneur for the last 25 years or so. My first medtech company, I have to say, and that's Tensive. I'm the CEO of the company. We are a Milan, Italy-based company developing innovative polymeric scaffolds that are bioabsorbable and promote the natural growth of the patient's own tissue. The first applications of this technology are for breast reconstruction following lumpectomy, breast tumor marking following lumpectomy, and eventually we'll move into the augmentation space. We completed 5 years of follow-up in our first in-human study, and we recently completed recruitment of a 94-patient pivotal study to support the first two indications in reconstruction and tissue marking. We'll move forward to seeking CE marks in Europe and FDA 510K approval during the course of next year in 27, and we're venture-backed by Panicus Partners with a 14 million Series A financing that was announced earlier this year.
that's great. Congratulations. Gopal, you want to talk about yourself and the company?
Thank you, Josh. Lovely to be here. Also a physician and serial entrepreneur. I've been in the medtech space now almost 3 decades. Co-CEO of CDX Medical Technologies. We've redesigned basically life support, emergency life support. Went through a huge transformation during the COVID pandemic. We've seen a lot of innovation in terms of clinical innovation, very little in the terms of device innovation. And CDX has redesigned what was a 60-pound ECMO device on a trolley and realized that it needed to be easy to use, needed to be safer than it is currently with all of its anticoagulation and catheters, and also needed to be ambulatory. So we took a 60-pound device, and if I may, this is it. And it's a wearable ECMO pump, which once you prime, connect, turn vertical, prime, connect, plug to the controller and push play. So we're allowing physicians to really kind of reimagine ECMO. And that's the exciting part. I think the title of this panel is, dear to my heart, is as a clinician, workflow is critical. Protocols are critical. So, very reproducible outcome is critical. And having a design lens with that in mind really kind of help us shape a reimagining of how ECMO could be used. Making it ambulatory, it was clear that anyone in respiratory distress or failure, being recumbent, being ventilated, had a lot of morbidity. So we discovered what was eventually showed up as a perfect storm. Everyone was trying to use ECMO in other scenarios, other arenas, even in the ambulances at points of care, but you couldn't do it with a 60-pound device. And so it's very exciting that we got to this stage. We've done all of our testing validation. We're now in the second phase of reproducing that in data for FDA submission. We've got their very kind collaboration and excitement about what we're doing. And we too just finished a smaller round, but a Series A, which Joe Chiani from Massimo led the round and joined our board. So we're pretty excited about the next stage.
Yeah, Joe's a great guy. Eva, tell us about yourself and your company.
Thanks, Josh. So I'm founder of Nostics. I've been an entrepreneur for a while, but this is my first medtech venture. We're tackling the second largest cause of death globally, which is bacterial infections that we're used to be able to treat well, but it's been challenged by antimicrobial resistance. And we do this by making sure that we know directly within 10 minutes if someone actually needs an antibiotic, and if so, exactly the right one. Because currently that takes a couple of days in the lab. So excited to talk about clinical workflows. We are development stage. It's a biosensor combined with generative AI. We're a company of 25 based in Amsterdam and Cambridge in the US.
Yeah, fantastic. Really interesting different markets right here. Women's health, plastic surgery, I think cardiovascular, intervention and diagnostics for antibiotic resistance. So what I'd love for each of you to do is talk about the current state of care and then how that is transformed with your technology. And really, we'll get into what the challenges are, but let's, at least for, everybody here, paint the picture of today and then what it's going to look like tomorrow. You want to start, Colby?
Absolutely. Great. Thanks. So if you think about a woman who has polycystic ovary syndrome, she is on a fertility journey. She's been attempting to conceive at home with her partner, or however she is going about that. And she is not able to ovulate. So when you can't ovulate, obviously no egg, no conception. First line treatment is drugs. So there's two options, Clomid and Letrozole, which can be prescribed by an OBGYN. And they sort of send you out into the world with these drugs. And then if those don't work for you, you're moving to a reproductive endocrinologist. And again, they'll start prescribing the same drugs, but now with more monitoring, more office visits, more time spent coming back to see if a follicle is growing. And those office visits start to add up in terms of time that you're spending as a patient being monitored, and for the physician, obviously seeing those patients back. If it doesn't work 1 month, one cycle, you're increasing your dose and continuing on this journey. So eventually women may ovulate and conceive, or they may just drop out of the process. And actually at this point, 60% of women who are trying these ovulation induction drugs are dropping out of the process. Reproductive endocrinologists will move a patient on from the next step, which is in their, in the current treatment algorithm, IVF. IVF is a miracle for families who are trying to conceive, but is pursued by only 33,000 women who have PCOS, where 500,000 are eligible to do something after a second line and aren't getting therapy. So those 33,000 women may move on to IVF. They may have 1, 2, 3 cycles in order to try to achieve pregnancy. And the REI clinic is sort of well set up to do that. But if you look at the rates of IVF in the US today, and you think about that dropout rate, the cost and the real emotional and physical challenges of going through that process of IVF are preventing many families from accessing the technology. So we present an opportunity in that second line to come in with a one-time procedure, office-based procedure to ablate the ovary, which helps to reduce androgen production and allow the rebalancing of hormones and allow ovulation at home on your own. And in our feasibility studies, we've seen 45% of women are able to ovulate in that first 3 months, where previously the drugs were not working for them. If you add drugs after 3 months, we saw another 20% ovulate. So what happens for these patients is that they're given an option that in one day they can now continue without coming back into the office. And from an REI's perspective, thinking about their clinical workflow, they're not adding an option that requires a lot of follow-up or requires a lot of lab work. Where IVF today is really backed up is in the lab with embryology, in terms of after that egg retrieval happens, how do we get all the way to an embryo that's ready for transfer? So here we're creating something that's leveraging their existing space, procedural space. They can go to a ASC if they choose. Doesn't take a lot out of their time and doesn't impact their lab. Adds a whole new option for women who are otherwise leaving their practice. And that is one of the reasons that I was really excited about coming to May Health, is because of the option to create a sort of seamless second line that REIs can offer without a big impact to their practice.
Awesome. So if you look at time, let's say from starting the process to baby and cost versus the same time to baby and cost, do you have a sense of what that that difference is?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that we're trying to answer with our larger study, because today we have 32 patients in.
Right.
So we'll see a little more right now in our 32 patients where we have done 12-month follow-up. 44% had achieved pregnancy. We had 8 live births. So that's thank you. Those babies are the reason we keep going. Those 8 babies that came from the feasibility study. So at 24 months, we'll see if we had a few more ongoing pregnancies as a result. And if you compare that to the drug process, again, you're sort of month by month monitoring and looking for pregnancy. So there's both a difference in the time to achieving ovulation, and then the amount of time that you need to spend maybe in your physician's office monitoring and working towards that pregnancy.
Okay. So Sanjay, same question: current state, future state, and what are the differences? And explain like what the disruption in sort of workflows are to be necessary to accomplish.
So every year, millions of women around the world will hear the words, "You have breast cancer." It's a devastating thing to hear. And while surgery will save many of those lives, it's sometimes at a cost. And the cost is the loss of something deeply personal, the sense of wholeness. And that's the really premises of Tensive, is that we believe that there is a better way forward. That's what started all this off. And that's why we've deployed our bioabsorbable polymeric implants that facilitate natural tissue regrowth first to that particular setting. Now, there are over 3 million breast cancer surgeries around the world every year. Over 2 million of those are lumpectomies. Now, for those who are not familiar with this in the audience, a lumpectomy, as I'm sure most of you are aware, is where the tumor and the margins are resected, as opposed to a mastectomy, which is a total breast removal, which was the more traditional approach towards breast surgery. Now, today, over 80% of mastectomies are reconstructed because we have silicone implants that can be used for that. However, the vast majority of lumpectomies are not reconstructed. So therefore, for the majority of women around the world at the moment, there is no suitable reconstruction option.
Yeah.
And we know that affects recovery. Appearance affects recovery. It affects confidence. It affects quality of life. So why are there no solutions?
How would you even reconstruct it today without?
Yeah, well, this is the issue, because the thing is, today the solutions don't work. There's 2 main options.
Yeah.
There are silicone implants, which can't be tailored for a lumpectomy defect.
Right.
They carry the risk, as you know, of rupture or capsular contraction, and they require reoperation in about 40% of cases. Also, you don't want to put something in that may have a risk of a lymphoma into an already malignant setting.
Right.
So really, silicone implants are not the option. Right. That leaves oncoplastic surgery, autologous flaps or fat grafts. Now, those are invasive, they are complex, they require multiple painful and costly surgeries, and they don't achieve the desired result. So we know the patients and surgeons are crying out for a simple, safe, and natural solution, which is what we've delivered. So what we've been able to demonstrate so far in 5 years of follow-up after the first in-human study, and also the more recent pivotal study that we've completed the recruitment of, and we've now started to publish the follow-up, are a few key things. What we saw in the first in-human study, which is where we asked ourselves, can we essentially rebuild the body naturally with our technology? And the answer was very clear. Our device was safe, it was predictable, and it delivered a natural reconstruction. In fact, the surgeons in the study, they wrote in Breast Cancer, the publication, in the abstract, in the conclusion, that Regenera can transform breast surgery by offering faster recovery time, less morbidity, and higher patient satisfaction. We had 100% excellent aesthetic scores at 6 months, no adverse events related to the device or serious adverse events. We saw retention or preservation of breast shape and symmetry. Pain was minimal, decreasing to 0 at 3 months, and surgeon satisfaction was 9.8 out of 10 in this initial study. So more recently in the pivotal study, where we get to the actual workflow, we're starting to see data around how these procedures are done and what's important. We continue to see the same safety, no allergic reactions, no infections. We're seeing a compatibility with radiotherapy, in that the radiotherapy itself does not disrupt the biocompatibility of the product or the mechanical properties of the product itself. We're seeing seamless integration with surrounding tissue. This is all published. we're seeing the continuation of the excellent self-reported outcomes from patients with a doubling of the physical well-being score at 1 month. We're seeing improved surgical effectiveness because what the surgeons can do now with this device is exercise a greater margin more precisely around the tumor itself with the confidence that they have a device to fill the space.
Right.
And then, absolutely for providers, what we're showing is that the average operative time, intraoperative time, is 74 minutes, even with sentinel node lymph node biopsy, which compares to over 2 hours when you're doing autologous flaps.
Right.
So we're seeing a clear benefit for the provider and the economics of the procedure as well. So these are where we really see the disruptions, the ability to rebuild the breast in a natural, permanent, and safe way with gradual degradation of the device, improved aesthetics and outcomes and satisfaction amongst the patients. In fact, one of the patients stated, for the first time since my diagnosis, I feel like myself again. I mean, that's one of the most satisfying things out of this kind of technology. And obviously for surgeons, high satisfaction levels, low morbidity, less intraoperative time, that also filters through to the economics for providers.
Super exciting. Yeah. Gopal, please tell us about, the same existing state and the future state with your technology.
Yeah, and I think there's a common theme of existing state is we're asking like, why is it so complex? And the innovator's mind is like, there's got to be an easier way, a smarter way to do things. And I think when we looked at lung transplant, which is where we initially got our footing, and we saw patient optimization be a very slow, very choice operation of trying to get someone who'd suffered either a viral insult or interstitial lung underlying condition have to be prepped for lung transplant, but not prepped enough so that the transplant was complicated and post-operative complications of recovery were hampered by the fact that they had to be ventilated and intubated and sedated and kept recumbent for some time. No one was really able or enabling a patient to have respiratory recovery. And all of this was tied to the fact that the device and the process was tethered. The patient was tethered to the device, lying flat on the bed. The physician was tethered to the operating room with perfusionists having to manage and monitor ECMO systems, and access, just getting vascular access to be able to cannulate and take the blood out for oxygenation. You were tethered to the surgeon, and we all know my peers, we're hard to get a hold of. And so access to getting someone on an ECMO was significantly reduced by a very complicated process that and it originally was built to keep it safe. We didn't need as much, but along came COVID, along came the discovery of a lot of other lung diseases where ECMO could have a significant impact, get to recovery, and change mortality rates from 60% in ARDS to 20 to 30% in ARDS. So dramatic effects. We realized that ECMO needed to be redesigned. And so we went up against cannulation, which was done by a surgeon, now being done by an intensivist and interventionalist, interventional radiologist, cardiologist, emergency medicine. So you got all of these minimally invasive physicians very capable of cannulating a patient. And they just recently published in the Critical Care Medicine Journal that their safety rates were equivalent, if not better than surgeons, because they're focused on the procedure. Secondly, we saw that the ECMO device itself was built in such a fashion that you couldn't wheel this without high-level resources. So you needed 3 nurses and a physiotherapist to actually pull the patient out of the bed with a horsetail of cannula down a corridor for ambulation, and actually created better outcomes simply by ambulating the patient. So we said, what if you didn't need all of this? And so now the state of care is anyone cannulates, and the cannula doesn't have to be a surgical insertion. You can dilate up to 20/21 French, from 19 to 23 actually. Connect this to our device, hook it to an oxygenator, and be ambulant at the get-go. So the protocol opportunity changes, is that I can do this anywhere in the hospital. It doesn't have to be operating room or critical care. I can choose all respiratory patients prior to ventilation, so I can now experiment with ECMO, and the protocol and the standards change as a result. And the physician is doing all of this because they're confident that's easy and safe. Those are the critical steps that we saw. And when you look at the the cost and differential analysis of having a patient removed from ICU into a step down, ambulant, and recovering, it's a hands down.
Awesome. Thanks. Eva, tell us again, current state, future state.
Yeah. So, when you're sick, you want to know what you have, right? And then you want to start treatment. I think that makes total sense to everyone. But the crazy thing is, when we talk about the current state for infectious disease or for many infectious disease, that's not the case. So it takes way too long to get those answers and diagnosis. So treatment will start before we know actually what's going on. If you look at our first clinical indication is UTIs, right? So I see quite a few women here, so they will probably know what that's like. So currently, if you have a UTI or you think you have a UTI, you'll go to a physician or you even go to the pharmacy. They'll do a pretty simple test, if they even do a test, which is a dipstick. Gives you a bit of an idea on, is there inflammation? There's certain biomarkers that could indicate for UTI. And usually they'll prescribe antibiotics based on that. And we call that blind prescribing. You're not really sure if it's a UTI. And you also, if it is a UTI, you don't know what bug is causing it. And this thing is really essential. So if you want to do effective treatment, you need to know for sure, is this indeed a UTI? Is there bacteria? And what is it? And if you look at the current state, because of a lack of this access to diagnostics, you see that for UTIs, a huge part of it actually is not a UTI. They'll still get antibiotics. And if they do, about 1/5 in cases get the wrong antibiotic. So that means you're suffering for more days, complications like kidney infections. And I think what a lot of people don't know is that sepsis actually, the largest part of sepsis is actually caused by UTI. So it's really critical in the future that we know within minutes what's going on and what should be treated. So, we're there in time. If we look at the clinical workflow, I think we're putting sense back into the clinical workflow. I would say it's quite disrupted at the moment. We're making it fit again.
This is why I love this panel. It's true innovation. You're creating lives, improving lives, and saving lives. If you're on stage, all the VCs in the audience, these are the innovatives that are going to change their lives, okay? On the full spectrum, beginning to hopefully extending and with a better quality. So let's turn our attention in the last sequence here, really to what the challenges are. Because I think if I'm listening to this, I'm like, yeah, bring it on. This makes total sense. Why don't we do this, right? So what are the barriers? Like, what's the challenges, right? Maybe we'll start, Eva, I'll get you to start this time. Why is this not a no-brainer? Like, what are the barriers in sort of changing that? And what are going to be your tactics to overcome those barriers?
Yeah, I think key is that when you transform or disrupt, there is someone that's going to maybe lose. So there's always a current value chain. And if you're moving care or if you're moving a solution from one place to another, you have to really be aware of that because the traditional industry might be very influential. So I think that could be like a key barrier that you have to be aware of. And I think if you look at, obviously what we're trying to do is make the clinical workflow make sense. Again, we're still introducing a new solution, right? So there's a new workflow. I think one of the things that we've really put an emphasis on, it has to be extremely easy to use. So you'll see a lot of innovations, you'll see a lot of great solutions, but it requires too many steps. It requires training. It requires a device that needs maintenance. And I think for effortless, let's say, clinical workflow design, you have to design your product that people want to use it and they really love it. But it's a challenge for a lot of technologies. Try and make something simple is always harder than making something, let's say, keeping it complex. Yeah. So I think these are the key challenges really in this.
Awesome. But what's like others with their, what are the, who's pushing back on this? Because it seems like obvious. If this was available, you'd do it. Do you foresee any pushback or any resistance to adoption?
Well, I think if you, for example, look at the US, in the US currently, what happens is that a physician can be an OBGYN or can be a family doctor. They'll send off a sample to the lab. They get reimbursement for that part, but they often even don't even administrate it because it's too much work for the reimbursement they get. Yeah. Then the lab, they'll get the reimbursement for running the tests, right? Now, doing the tests from the lab to the physician makes someone really happy, which is the physician, because they have a very healthy incentive, financial incentive to run these tests. But obviously, there are some parties that are now used to running all these tests that won't be doing that anymore in the future. And these are some of the centralized microbiology labs. But if you look at infectious disease, microbiologists are essential. They will for sure be in the future as well. But they'll have a changing role. So specifically for us, that's the move of care. So from the centralized lab to the point of care. So
it's who has control of it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Gopal, how about in your case? What are the challenges to getting to this future state?
As we talk to clinicians who wanted to be using ECMO more and for broader indications in new clinical sites outside of the intensive care unit, it was the protocol. We have a standard way of looking at, saving lives that has a defined outcome. But they realize that protocol needs to be challenged. So how do you challenge that? What's the setup of your clinical process? Who are you engaging? And there is a very clear balance of who you're enabling, who you're disenfranchising, who are you taking away, who are you inserting. And at the end of the day, it was really, take out all these complex variables and reveal to them that their protocol is very restrictive, that their protocol currently has barriers in complexity. And if you could simplify those protocol steps and allow fewer resources, well-trained resources, but fewer resources to provide the actual treatment, you get buy-in, and it's a stepwise process. It's not overnight, as we all know. We've all been doing this for a long time. But you've got your enablers, you've got your passionate champions, you've got your naysayers. The edge case scenario conversation happens every single day. Oh, I needed to do this. I need 9 liters. No, when do you need 9 liters? Well, I had a patient 3 years ago. And so you kind of break this down and say, well, in most of the protocols, this is what you require. And go out with a very specified cohort, very specified endpoint, clarify the protocol, and put it to test. At the end of the day, it's scientific.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Sanjay, it seems like every patient would want what you have to offer, but what would be the reasons that a surgeon might push back, or, what are the resistance that you see to it?
Excellent question. I mean, so far in development, we found a huge level of enthusiasm once surgeons got familiar with it. I mean, and patients as well, for the reasons you've laid out. In the pivotal study, recruitment was very fast because surgeons were already telling us that this is intuitive. It's a one-stop solution. You hydrate the sponge intraoperatively, put it in the resected tumor space, close it up, and you can follow it through radiology, and you see the growth of new tissue and the degradation of the device. So that, as you say, I mean, there are a lot of positives there. I think but looking at that and thinking about it as we go forward, I think communicating that is going to be an important feature. I mean, we found surgeons wanting to get into the study or asking whether they can use the device just through word of mouth, but that's locally. That's obviously in the 10 leading breast cancer centers that we've been working with in Italy and in Spain. So I think communication is going to be an absolute key to be able to explain to surgeons that this is a real innovation. I mean, obviously, we're getting some very strong peer-reviewed publications. I think one of the challenges is going to be regulatory, because we're in that mixed space, or that sort of twilight zone, because it is not a permanent device. This is a gradually degrading biopolymer. And so therefore, the duration of follow-up studies to be able to confirm that what's left behind and is decreasing, and what effects that's having locally, and then what effects systemically is happening with what's being released. I think that is something where, I know we're working on that and we're getting good data there, but making sure that regulators and, practitioners are aware of that and comfortable with that is going to be important. And I think ultimately, coming back to also the economic discussion, is that, reimbursement and how that's structured. Because today for lumpectomies in the States, a lot of surgeons don't do reconstructions because the reimbursement rate relative to the time they're going to have to take to do autologous flaps or do fat grafting just doesn't make it worth their while, and likewise for the providers. So being able to position this device within that space to get the right reimbursement code and the right reimbursement level, because the economics are so favorable, because it does reduce operative time, it does lead to faster recovery, and obviously there are the other aesthetic and patient outcomes as well. Being able to get that into the right package and being able to sort of convince and communicate for reimbursement purposes, I think is going to be the other key challenge or opportunity, whichever way you want to look at it.
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah. And Colby, in your case, who
Yeah.
are the what's the resistance you expect, and how are you going to overcome that?
So I think, when we think about clinical workflows, there's kind of two dimensions that we can make it easier and more digestible. One is just the ease of use of the product and the procedure itself. And the other dimension is the power of the reward, right? The motivation to do that disruption.
Yeah.
So I had the gift of working on a product previously where we did not have, it was hard to get people to use the product because it was an emergency use scenario, right? This is an obstetrics product for postpartum hemorrhage. Physicians, it's very hard to get into the case as a, industry person and support them. So they were reluctant to try it that first time. But when they did try it and it worked exceptionally well right there in the moment, they were highly motivated to make that change. So that's, kind of one profile. I would say we're in the other profile, because you asked the question about how long does it take to see a benefit. Even once you get pregnant, then it's 9 months for the baby, right? And so what the clinic is really excited about, and the physicians are very excited about, is pregnancy. And then, of course, when patient brings baby back in to, show him or her off, then we really have a happy family, right? So that's a long time to get that reward, but the reward is very powerful. So what we've kind of focused on is that ease of use dynamic, right? And so working with reproductive endocrinologists to make sure that the procedure is as similar to an egg retrieval as possible, and that we're fully managing all of their expectations about what that procedure is going to feel like. So they are, familiar with doing a transvaginal ultrasound guided, needle delivered to the ovary. That's what egg retrieval is. We made our device look just like that so that they have this familiarity of, okay, I'm putting this needle in the same place, looking at the same TV that I'm doing my egg retrievals every day. There are going to be differences. We invest heavily in training up front to make sure that they know exactly what it's going to feel like when they put that needle out there. That's one of the focuses that we bring to try to make it easier. And then, that gives them okay, I can try this a number of times to look for that payoff of my patient getting pregnant and bringing the baby
That's
back.
fantastic. Yeah, I've had a few experiences, transforming paradigms in clinical care. And it feels like the table stakes are, you have to have the data. So, and ideally that data includes, safety and as well as cost. And then you really do need your champions. The champions ideally is the specialty society. And I've faced situations with one of my companies where the specialty society was adamantly against it because it threatened the power structure within the specialty society. And that is an exceptionally difficult thing to navigate. But in all cases, the way we did navigate it is with champions. And the champions came from the community physicians that were seeing the benefits in their practices and literally staged an uprising that ultimately brought the specialty society to heel, and we got the company saved. But it's a classic thing. You think that physicians, for the most part, would adopt things. Everything that we've just heard here just makes so much sense for healthcare. I mean, everything should be adopted. Like, I wish it was here today. It would just make healthcare so much better, patients better, and yet change is really hard for physicians, and change is really hard for the healthcare system. And I'm hoping we can have a more enlightened policies around these types of things that really encourage this, because this is the future, right? And we have to see these companies succeed, because we're all going to want or need these technologies for ourselves or our families. So it's a really important thing. I'm going to ask each of the panelists sort of like in our remaining time here, just sort of a word of wisdom. We've talked a lot about your technologies, but I want you to like now think about everyone who's, watching this online or here with us. Like what advice, what encourages you through this journey, and sort of, where do you get your inspiration, motivation? I think I'll let anybody start, but I'd love to hear sort of when, as you go into this, what is truly a battle for the change of healthcare, right? I mean, it's not these are all seem obvious, but I know they're hard, right? So what keeps you going? What's the thing that you're focused on in sort of that journey? Somebody want to jump on it?
Patient experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's probably what motivates all of us around here and all of us in the audience. Ultimately, that's the most rewarding thing we get. And that's the thing that gets us out of bed in the morning. And that's, I would say, to having, this is the sixth company I've built over a few decades. And when you're dealing with all of the challenges of developing a technology, bringing it into the clinic, getting regulators engaged, working with physicians, dealing with investors, all of those things are going to be heavy and hard and difficult. Yeah. But the one thing that will keep your motivation up is seeing that patient experience. And therefore, in the design and development of a new molecule or a new product, try and stay close to that. Try and always be understanding what is this going to do for patients, and not just in an abstract way, not just in a in a motivational way, but really in the operating theatre, in the OR, or in the post-operative period, or in the treatment flow. Is that how is the patient going to benefit here? How is their life going to change? Because ultimately, physicians, despite the challenges they face, if that works, they'll eventually get on board. And I think that's I think probably I've pretty spoken for all of us on the panel here. I hope that's probably the one of the guiding stars for us.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd see the same thing from the perspective of the physician. You go out there and you see the clinicians, the surgeons, the intensivists, the nurses. They're all geared to one thing: the patient safety and outcome. Every day they are fighting their own battles to get good treatment into, deployed to the patient and best outcome. And so when you see that frustration, and then you give your innovation and put your innovation in their hands, and you see a great outcome, you see a patient walk out of ICU, that's it. That's gold right there. And I feel that's the sole motivator, is you're impacting lives. But you're impacting it as a team. Everyone is trying to do the same thing, and they're struggling against the inertia of the politics, the system, the reimbursement, as are we. But, we kind of do it with like-minded people, and I think that's a great thing. And I'd also recommend, like, if you're going out and trying to persevere through this arduous journey and get innovation into the right hands, is to be a designer, not a marketer. I think that, you really need to be listening. It's a scientific design. And everybody out there, every physician, clinician, nurse is a collaborator.
Yeah, fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, I get completely, motivated by, I'm solving my own problem with the clinical indication that we're working on. I think that's a huge driver, but speaking to many people, they've experienced the same thing. And I think that's such a big driver. You can make an impact on so many people. And I think on the other aspect, I think in terms of engaging champions, and what we found is because we're developing this new scientific breakthrough, microbiologists are very, very keen to use a tool where they can kind of see biology in a different way. So we're looking at the metabolism of pathogens. It's exciting, Beyond the clinical use case, it's also very exciting new science. And those people can also really help push the adoption of the technology. And there might not even be the end user. So that one might be something for other people to
all right, Colby, in the last 10 seconds here, you get the last
Yes.
word. My favorite drink and last word.
All right. Okay, that's next. I mean, obviously cannot take away from the patient outcomes being, what drives us. But, when you ask, what do you do when you're facing challenges? To me, it's just get out into the field. Go visit our customers, spend time with them, and talk about what's challenging. And I think what's great about medical technology is that me, a history major, like I'm not an engineer, I'm not a doctor, but I can truly understand physicians' problems and clinicians' problems by sitting with them, watching how they work, asking questions, hearing their feedback, and try to break down, eating the elephant in little bites to try to solve our problems.
I love it. There you have it, everybody. Disrupting clinical workflows and improving patient care. Thank you. A great panel. Thanks, everybody. Back.